In the second example, I'm using some assets that come from one of the tutorials made by the content team for the Learn website. They come from two different projects, actually. So in this case, what I've built is a character that has a character controller, so it can move around. It has a bunch of animations, and then using animation rigging, it can interact with the environment. So let me show you how it looks. You can see the character has an idle animation where he puts the rake down on the ground. Then I can go around, I can move around with the arrow keys, and he plays this run animation. And when I release the arrow keys, he plays this idle animation where he has the rake with both hands. And then once he's finished, he will go back to the one where the rake is on the ground. And then he will stay on that and loop through that. So I had these two animations coming from the education content team. So I haven't touched them, I haven't modified them, and I use them for like moving and stopping. And then I made this one, the idle rake. And for the idle rake, I used animation rigging. If you noticed, what he does is he puts the rake on the ground, and then the interesting thing is the rake has to stay pointed to this point on the ground, which actually, as you can see, has a gizmo inside. So I'm using a reference point. And then I built the animation using that and the IK on this arm. So let me show you the setup. So if I go into the object that contains all the rigs, all the constraints, you will notice that I have here a left hand IK, which is the one that controls this arm. As usual, is set up to control the arm, and then there's an object here in the wrist, which you can see this red circle, and then there's an object that's the hint for the rotation. So if you see the target is here somewhere, left hand IK target, there we go, and I use that for the animation. So let me stop the game actually. So again, if we look at that animation clip, idle rake, which is this one, and we select the character, that's what the character does. Sorry, idle rake. So what he's doing is I have the target that controls the arm, and as you can see through animation rigging, I can make sure that the rake always points to the ground. So how do I do that? The idea is very simple. I first have the left hand IK constraint, as I said before, and then I have rake multi-aim. And rake multi-aim is another constraint which makes, so multi-aim is something that makes an object point to another object. We saw it before with the head pointing to the head of the Viking pointing to the archer, and this character actually has 1, 2, as you can see, it points to this thing. But here I'm using it on the wrist. So rake multi-aim is set up so that the left hand IK target, so the actual target that I'm moving here, points to this point here on the ground. And this means that wherever I move this target, left hand IK target, the target is going to rotate, and it's always going to put the rake pointing to that point on the ground. Of course, if I move it up, it's gonna detach, and if I move it too low, it's gonna go through the floor. But if I move it in a certain circle, then it correctly points to the ground, which means that the rake is gonna be pointing to that exact point on the ground, which is super cool. Even though one thing to point out is that the rake actually, its pivot is, as you can see, it's here. It's basically where the right hand grabs it. It's not on the ground. So this allows me to work with something that doesn't have a pivot in the right position in a clever way. So that thing, I used it for this animation specifically to be able to create a different idol, because the original idol was with 2 hands. So I give it a bit more interesting motion to the character. And then I also use that specific position of the rake for this other part of the animation, which is what I'm going to show you now. So the interactive part of this character is that when he sees coffee, when he sees a coffee cup, he will look at it. And as you can see, he will look at the closest one, provided it's not behind him. As soon as he sees one, he will turn his head. which is very interesting for gameplay purposes, because of course, like, you can direct the player and show them that there's something that they can interact with. So I do this with a combination, of course, of scripting and the animation rigging. The scripting, I'm not going to show it to you. It's not really important. I basically just find all the objects in the scene, and then I assign them to the, head multi-aim. So as I said before, the head is constrained to look at an object. Actually, there's another object here called eye gaze, which is this gizmo here. That also contains the marker, so the one that you see when the character basically sees something interactive. So what I do is I move the head gaze to the coffee cup, and then the character will look at it. And the in programming, I turn this value from 0 to 1, and that's what makes the character look at the coffee cup. And then, of course, I turn the marker on, right? I turn it on and off. Very, very simple. So again, the part where I find the closest object, that's up to you. That's, something for you to define how it works, which algorithm do you want to use, if you have a pre-made list or you spawn things on demand, But the cool thing is, like, this head movement, that, whatever whatever animation he's playing is always going to look at the interactive object, which makes it very, very nice and adds that extra layer of polish to the game. The second part of this interaction is I've built some the other IK on the other arm, on the right arm, so that when he moves close to an object, it can then pick the object up without actually having to place the character, like, precisely. So if the character is here, he's always gonna point to the object and grab it up. So let me show you how it looks like. I press space, and then he grabs the cup and drinks, and he throws it away. And if I do it with this one, and I'm a little bit on the side, he will grab the cup and drink. And this one again. And I also built a bit of getting closer to it. So he grabs the cup and drinks. And this is super cool because it makes it so you don't have to create like a billion animations. I'll show you with this one. Grabs the cup and drinks. So the hand will always reach for the cup. I'll show you it in slow motion, actually. If I select project settings and time, and then I put this one to 0.3 and press play, I need to have the game view on the side. So look at what happens. Oops, I need to make sure that the character is lined up. I don't know why. There's something with timing. It's a bit strange. So let me put it back to 0.3. And then you will notice the animation in a second. If I press space, he does this, reaches for the cup, grabs it, and drinks. And that animation is partly pre-made and partly procedural. So if I move it here and I press space again, he always correctly reaches for the cup and grabs it up. So that's super cool. So how do I do that? As I said, it's partly done with the IK on this arm. So if I go to the right hand IK, this is the constraint that's controlling this arm. And then I have a bit of a setup here. So what I do is I have two targets. I have one thing called right hand IK target, which is where the wrist tries to go. And then I have a programmatic target. And this is made it so I can control the two things independently, because basically the programmatic target, which right now is in front of him, it's something that I snap to the cup where I want the wrist eventually to be, and I do it in code. The target, which is the one on the wrist, I animate it. So here I have two states. You can see reach forward and drink. Reach forward has the movement, of course, of reaching forward. Let me show you how it looks like. So you can see that he goes for the this point in space, grabs, and stops. And then drink, which is specific to the cup of coffee, does this. So he has the hand already here, and he's getting ready, and then he takes a sip, and then throws the cup away. So the motion is basically broken into two parts. This part, the part where he drinks, is hand animated. I'm animating the wrist, the IK of the wrist myself, the red sphere, and that's why I use this one, the target. The one where he reaches for the coffee, which you could see this as a generic animation that you use for any object. This one is using the light blue target, which is the programmatic one, which is the one that I move in programming. The key thing here is because of how the animator works in Unity, I can't have them both to be the same object, because if I were to have them as the same object, as soon as I move from this clip to this clip here, so here I will set the position in programming to the cup, and let me show you again in slow motion. So let me put the character back here. Let me go to 0.3, press play. So you will notice that at the beginning, the two objects are here at the center, and that's fine. Now we're going to go into this animation state. So if I press spacebar, you see the object has snapped exactly where I want it. And for now, they're together. So the programmatic one, this one, and the red one, the circle, the one that I animate, are together. As I move through this state, reach forward, if I go to the animation, so reach forward, as you can see, has some keys on the right-hand IK target here towards the end. That's not really important, but it doesn't have the programmatic one. I can't animate this object because as I do this and he grabs the object, as you can see now they separate. So now we're in between. We're at the end of this clip, and then at this point we're blending into the drinking one. So now the hand animated target is in control. So now we're blending into that. So you remember the target was here, and that's why we're blending from wherever it is to that position. And now it's all animation. So it's not programmatic anymore. And you see the programmatic one stays here. So this one is the one that I never animate. In fact, I can move it freely because it's not controlled by the animator. But this one, I can't really, well, I can move it now because I'm in pose, but like I can't really move it in play mode. Well, this one I can, you see, because this one is taken control by the animator. So what I had to do here, because I have two targets and I want to blend between them, I also have another constraint here, which is called IK multiparent. Very simple. We're controlling the regular target, right? The one animated. We basically blend it from its regular value, which would be if this was on 0, to the programmatic value. So I blend between the two states. So I'm using an animation constraint to actually blend between full animation and code. Very, very simple. And I do that here in the state. So if I go back to reach forward, here somewhere, IK multiparent, you see there's a keyframe here. So here I'm basically saying this is on, so the two IKs are gonna match, and that's why they match. And then it goes back to 0. And here is at 0. So that's why you might see like a bit of a jerky motion, but we can move this forward actually. And that's where we give control back to animation. And now the wrist is gonna blend for this remaining part of the animation clip with the drinking one. So in the drinking one, again, the wrist is here, and then it drinks in animation. And programming here is not affecting anything. It's a bit of a complicated setup, but I think it's very powerful. It's very powerful to understand why this happened. I hope it was clear. Again, the key point that I want to drive here is that if you keyframe this object here at any point in any clip, then the animator takes control of it, and you cannot move it. You can move it in programming, but you're going to see some weird results. So that's why I had to separate them into two objects, and then I used animation rigging to blend between them whenever I needed it. So now I have a generic clip, the reach forward, which in programming snaps this object to the target and goes for it, grabs it, and then gives control back to the animation. And then I have a more specific clip, which is specific for coffee, where he drinks the coffee. And you can imagine that at this point in your animator, you will have a generic grabbing clip, and then you would have like more specialized clips depending on the object that you're reaching for. So I'm going to show you the result one more time. Let me maximize the view. I think it's in slow motion. That's fine. Goes for it, grabs, pulls up, and drinks. Thank you for watching. I hope you have fun with animation rigging. Maybe I'm going to add some more examples to this project, so keep an eye on it. Bye-bye.